yes, there are times where you're going to quote unquote go to the dark place, or whatever you want to call it. And you're going to push yourself because you have this goal and your motivation is really high for the goal. But that's not every day. You can't go to the well every day. You'll kill yourself. You got to manage when you go to the well. And when you do these crappy sessions where you're being dramatic and you're looking like you're in a lot of pain, you're half going to the well when you don't need to, and you're not really getting better. You're getting worse.
The Fitness Movement is brought to you by Zor Fitness. We offer coaching and individualized program design, as well as educational content for coaches and athletes. It's all one place, zorfitness.com. Today's episode is being pulled from the archives. I want to revisit a conversation I had with Sam Smith. I've had Sam on the show twice now. It feels like I've been more than that because I've talked with him quite a bit and just have dialogued him as another coach that I see eye to eye on a lot of things. And I thought this conversation was, again, something that was worthwhile for people to revisit. And I also had Sam on, as I said before, on the show a second time, episode 95, if people want to hear more from Sam. So please enjoy this conversation with Sam Smith. So Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to do this. And one of the things that I find super interesting about you is that you competed in golf at a high level. And I know like a number of people in this space who have either do golf now or, have competed in golf. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's interesting that they seem like very opposite things, but I'm sure they have more similarities than most people realize. And yeah, I mean, you currently coach a bunch of high level CrossFit athletes. And obviously, like I said, you competed in golf at a high level. What similarities do you see between competing in CrossFit and golf?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've gotten that more over the years, and it's been a great resource for me to pull from in my coaching practice for my higher level athletes, because at the end of the day, any physical endeavor you take to the pinnacle of it, there are principles that are wrapped inside of that for that particular person. So in golf, at the peak, you have to become very diligent with your time. You have to become very technical with your characteristics of the sport. You have to invest a lot of time into your competitive self versus your practicing self. You have to review your results and your outcomes, et cetera. Like there's a lot that goes into that process of being at the peak of something. And then you look at the CrossFit world, it's the exact same thing, where you need to become this master full movement specialist. You need to become cognizant of your limitations and strengths. You need to understand your competitive self versus your training self. So there's all these characteristics that are wrapped inside of peak levels of performance that allow me to pull from my own experience, even though it wasn't in CrossFit, that I can then help or utilize with my clients who are near the peak in the sport.
Yeah, it's like if you're a high performer in one arena, regardless of what it is, I mean, even if it's not necessarily a super physical endeavor, just to understand what that entails and the other choices that you're going to have to make outside of that thing. I mean, that's pretty transferable across the board, I feel like.
Yes, 100%. I think that would be the big piece that you can draw from it. If people are aware of what they can draw from it, is that there's so much, let's use the word sacrifice, in trying to attain a extremely high level in any pursuit. And so understanding that, you can then better communicate that and help organize that with people that you're working with who are in a different sector.
Yeah. I recently had Chris Hardenberg on the show, and he actually mentioned how he thought CrossFit was sort of like high intensity golf in the sense that like you lose a lot more than you win in that sport.
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
It's more about like, are you able to be consistent and sort of minimize your weaknesses to a degree than it is about winning all the time.
Yeah.
I just thought that was super interesting too. That was something that I hadn't heard before.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. I've never heard that, but the parallels are there. I mean, you're trying to become the best across multiple, I don't want to say events. Let's say events. And then in golf, of course, rounds. So it's like, it's not who has the single best day or the worst day, but who is the best across all of them. So that sustainability is very, very important. So there are, there's similarities there. That's high intensity golf.
Yeah. And even like scoring systems, like for example, the Open, you get points. For example, basically you're hurt the worst by the thing you're the worst at, rather than like if you win an event, it really doesn't matter in the Open. Like I always say, like you could win 4 events in the Open and not even qualify for like the next level if you can't do a muscle up, for example, and that's one of the workouts. So it's sort of the same thing. If you completely bonk like one hole, for example, you could just throw yourself out of contention.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think that's a great aspect of the sport is it doesn't bias someone with a very unique skill. You have to have, you got to be competent across the board. And it's the same with golf. Cause like if you're, to use a golf term, if your short game is not great and you're a great ball striker, so off the tee, your irons, your wedges are great. But if you get around the green and you can't get up and down, or you don't putt that well, you'll get destroyed when you go to a tougher course, or the conditions are tougher and you just, you can't save shots around the green. So same with CrossFit. If your muscle up, legless rope climb, handstand walking abilities are not up to par, but your lifting, your capacity are at elite level, once a higher skill event comes forth, you're going to get destroyed. So there needs to be great competency across the board at higher levels of the sport.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's people in golf who they just want to, say they're good at driving and they just want to smash the ball all the time. And that's what they want to do on a regular basis. And they never work on their short game.
Yeah.
And they probably never get to a super high level. And it's the same thing in CrossFit. Like people who are just want to lift the barbell all the time and they never want to breathe. And it's like, well, yeah, you can be super strong, but you're not going to, do stuff in the sport.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Then you should consciously recognize that so that you can then decide, well, I don't want to compete. I just want to lift heavy because it feels good and it aligns with my essence of who I am. And I don't really want to breathe. And it's like, great, that's cool. Now, when you bring in the conversation of, well, I want to compete, and of course we define what that means, then the conversation becomes, well, you need to be able to breathe, because that's essentially the barrier to entry into the sport. Like if you can't do dumbbell snatches and burpee box jump overs for 10 minutes, then nonstop doing, 22 reps a minute, it's futile.
Yeah. The parallels are quite funny.
Yeah.
So our conversation today, we want to talk about what's basically it going to take to get from an athlete from being at like a good level to a great level. So maybe from a quarterfinals qualifier to qualifying through to the semifinals, or from the semifinals to actually get to the games for the first time, for example. So what's it going to take to sort of one up your game? That's really what we're going to focus on. Yeah, like what's that going to like look like from a lifestyle perspective? What's that going to look like from a training design perspective? So to start off, since we're already talking about golf and like the mental aspect of that, from a mindset perspective, what changes are going to need to occur for someone who's an intermediate athlete as they start to increase towards becoming more of an elite athlete?
In the context of CrossFit or a golfer?
CrossFit.
Oh, CrossFit. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's create some definitions here. So intermediate, is that what you said?
Yeah. We'll just give a scenario, for example.
Yeah.
Someone qualified through quarters. So they competed in the quarterfinal.
Okay.
But that was the end of their season. They didn't make it through the semis. What's it going to take for them to get to a semifinal level?
Gotcha. Okay. Going to the semifinals. And if we use the North America continent, I mean, that's top 120 out of what, like 12,000 or maybe less, maybe 10,000 people. Or no, excuse me. Yeah, I think about 10,000 qualified.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Yeah. So from 10,000, the top 120 go to the semifinals. And say you get, 500th in the quarterfinals. Okay. So you got a good ways to go.
Right.
So what does that look like? Well, your training volume probably has to go up in the subsequent year. A bigger focus has to go into certain areas of your training to build those skills. And the reason I'm saying this is because that's going to shift your perspective on your pursuit of the goal. Because if the goal becomes a little out of reach, or even a lot out of reach, which is a semifinal for this person, that's going to be commensurate with how much effort and time and energy you have to put into to keep moving towards that. So lifestyle, as in you probably have to start valuing more sleep if you aren't already. Like that needs to become the base of the pyramid, which is what I tell all my clients, like sleep is the base and then everything builds from that. Your social support system, so the people around you, your gym, those people need to believe in your goal. They need to support you in that. That's a very big piece that a lot of people don't think about. And then nutrition. So if that wasn't perfect, that needs to be even more dialed to support the increase in training volume, to support the increase in demands on the body. So everything has to become a little tighter. Like I always like to say, you're tightening the gears a little bit more if the goal is something a little bit more out of reach. So there is a big mindset shift, because everything in your life now needs to, not everything, but let's say 90% of your stuff needs to start revolving around, well, I want to go to semis, so I need to start prioritizing things. I need to be a little bit selfish, really. Like my goals and the pieces that go into that goal need to become priority over going out on Saturday night with my friends, doing a week vacation. It's a choice, and there's going to have to be sacrifices that for some people are uncomfortable, and those are probably the people that aren't going to go there anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But that's the reality of it.
Yeah, mindset is super tough because it's such a broad question. That threw you a really broad question at the beginning, which isn't helpful.
That's all right.
Yeah, like thinking about basically what is it going to take of me to, like you said, dial in a little bit more on each one of these things. I think that's actually probably a good place to start with mindset, is thinking about, okay, let me look at each one of these areas of my life and how can I just dial them in each just a little bit more. And the process of doing that is actually working on your mindset.
Yes. And what I'll add is you got to take it a layer deeper, and you got to ask, well, why do I really want the goal, and what's driving the goal? Because how strong the driver is going to be in relation to how much effort and time you put into the goal. Because if the driver is a really weak driver, like you want Instagram likes, you want more popularity, you want people to like you, you want somebody to love you, or you want to get more notice from the opposite sex. When you come into contact with the adversity and challenges that you inevitably will face in that pursuit, especially physically, your psychological strength will not be able to hold up to what it's being pushed against. So when somebody has a lofty goal like the semis and they want to make a big push for it, so say, like we said earlier, they got 500th or 400th and they want to make top 120 the next year, then we need to discuss multiple times, okay, what's this goal? What are you hoping to gain from this goal that you don't have right now? And what if you don't achieve it? Like, what happens if it doesn't come to fruition? Like, how's that going to change your life, good or bad? Like, what we want to play out these scenarios. We want to have a great understanding of what we're about to get into, because by doing so, we almost like lock ourselves into that pursuit. It's like, trying to think of an analogy. Like you're getting on a ride and you buckle yourself in. It's like, I'm on this ride and I'm not getting off the ride until it's done. And that buckling is like the tangible aspect of you committing yourself to the ride. And that's what we're trying to do up front before we get into it, is let's really make sure that this is the ride we want to get on. And then if it is, let's put all of our eggs into that basket.
Yeah. Yeah. Before you actually commit to the thing, making sure that it's something that is worth committing to for you, where you're currently at, knowing what sacrifices that's going to take, like talking through those with your coach and really being able to figure out, like, yeah, is this still something that I want to pursue? Which probably not enough competitors ask, to be honest.
And that's that's the one thing I wanted to get at, is it's important that these athletes sit and open their eyes to what is required to be at that level. And thankfully, I have clients who or athletes, I'll use those interchangeably, who've been to the games, who've been to sanctionals, regionals. So I have insight to what is required to get to that level. So when I consult with clients of mine who want to get towards it, I can give them a dose of reality and be like, okay, this is what they do and this is how their life is. Now, is that feasible? And if they're like, oh no, I don't know, that's too much. Like, okay, well, that's all right. Then we need to change our perception of the goal and actually change what is, realistic and what is more feasible for us to go after. And maybe that's, just improving on this past year and working on these particular characteristics, and then reassessing next year or in 6 months where we're at and see if, we want to make a bigger adjustment. But yeah, not enough people sit and take time to really evaluate like what goes into being at that level. And as the sport keeps growing and getting bigger and self-selecting for better athletes, that's going to pull more characteristics that are required to be elite in a sport. Whereas 10 years ago, it wasn't big enough yet that, anybody could like come off
you
the
could
street and be okay.
Recreationally elite.
Exactly. Not now. You just listen to Matt Frazier on any of the podcasts he's done. You listen to how the guy was like a warrior. It's like, I'm not using any steak knives. I don't go out to eat. He adopted 100% the athlete persona that you need to be elite in anything. And I hear him talking about that, and it's awesome because hopefully it's eye-opening to a lot of people that if you really want to take this seriously, then you have to approach this like a job, and all your energy and time goes into that. And again, it's not feasible for some because you need to make a living, you need to support your family, etc. And that's why it's not for everyone. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be for everyone. It's a lie if everyone thinks they can do that, because they can't. And they need reality, and they need some truth so that they can make better goals and not go down this ride and get halfway through it and be like, yeah, I'm done. I need to get off this, because there's poor intentions there.
Yeah. I think a lot of the sub-elite athletes who are training like they're elite,
mm-hmm.
but aren't quite at that threshold yet, who maybe still have like a full-time job, for example,
mm-hmm.
and they're still trying to have that full training load, they have to be, I don't want to say more disciplined, but they have to be really, really dialed in and almost cut even more stuff out, because they're trying to like hold a full-time job and train twice a day, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wake up in the morning, I train, I like take care of my nutrition, all that stuff, still make sure I get enough sleep, then go to my full-time job, then do a second training session, and then make sure I'm basically eating and going to bed. Like, that's almost, I don't want to say more dialed in, but that's again the sort of what we're talking about, and like cutting everything else out of the picture.
100%. And I would add identifying like what that work is, because to be honest, I mean, if you're coaching in a CrossFit box 20, 25 hours a week, that's so exhausting. Like, I did that for a little bit, and it's draining if you bring any energy to it, which you should. And if, because unfortunately that's what people want, is they want a cheerleader to be like, yeah, you're doing great, keep pushing. And that's exhausting. Even if it fills you up, like, you're still using a lot of energy. And if you're training twice a day and you're trying to become elite, we got to remember we all have this cup of stress and energy that we can handle, and all these things go into it. And if your work is very draining, you're taking up a lot of room in that cup that you want to put into your training, because your training is stressful and it takes up a lot of energy, both psychologically and physiologically. And so you need space and bandwidth to handle that, which is why the more priorities you have and the more obligations you have to be tighter with everything, because you don't have extra bandwidth to play with. You're like on the border, and if anything's out of line, you tip over the cup, and now you can't recover well. You got nagging injuries. You feel overtrained, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. The way I try to explain it is basically almost working out becomes like the easy part. Never that it's like super easy, but like people recognize that, oh, the stuff I have to do outside of training requires almost more discipline. And since it's not so intense, it's just like something that I can always do. Like you can always, improve your sleep quality a little bit. You can always be more diligent about staying off technology before bed. You can always X, Y, and Z. And all of those things that you do will help you adapt better to whatever you're doing in the gym. So just putting in more work doesn't equal better results, which again, good athletes or maybe great athletes and their coaches understand that process. But a lot of people who are more intermediate don't get that it's like, oh, I just gotta, hard work pays off. It's not that, hard work plus a lot of sleep and really good food and a support system equals results.
And great intention.
Right. Yeah. And having your mindset correctly when you're going into your training sessions and all of it. I think just having that conversation of it's not just about training hard. It's about what does your lifestyle look like and how can you align your lifestyle outside of training so that you can adapt better to the training that you're actually doing in the gym. And that's sort of my summary of what you just said.
Yeah. I'll be short on it. The people, almost everyone gets into CrossFit or competitive CrossFit because they love to train. They love exercise. Mm-hmm. Like that's the habit that they already have in place that like I was talking to my fiance the other day and she had to take like 3 weeks off of training for a procedure she got done. And she was asking like, have you ever taken 3 weeks off from training? And I said, no, the longest time I've taken off from exercise has been a week every here and again for over the last decade. So like the people in our sphere love to train and it's just part of who we are. Like you don't have to tell us to go to the gym and train, but educating and opening their eyes to how important everything else is outside of it, which are the hard habits and behaviors to align to better create performances in the gym that move you closer to the goal. That's challenging. And that's exactly what you just said. And I think anybody who's coached for any extended period of time will recognize that those are the things that are more challenging to work with clients on. And when you can connect those pieces with their highest value, which is competing and achieving, some outcome, it becomes easy for them to draw the connection. And now it's no problem to, get to bed earlier, to be off technology earlier before bed, chew their food more, eat at the same time each day, et cetera, et cetera.
A lot of the sleep and eating hygiene habits come into this as well. Mm-hmm. Say you had an athlete who, again, is this intermediate, like quarterfinals qualifier, wants to get to the semis next year, and they sleep, even if it's 7 hours a night and they think that's pretty good. Maybe, they don't have great habits surrounding that sleep though. Mm-hmm. What things could they do from a really practical standpoint might you like recommend to them as your athlete that they could do to improve sleep quality or quantity?
Well, I'd first ask them, do you think you sleep enough? And then I'd wait for the response. And then I would ask, well, do you think the quality is great as well? And most of the time, those questions will allow for some introspection where they think, yeah, you know what? Maybe I could sleep more and maybe the quality could be better. And then say, to play devil's advocate, they say, yeah, I sleep enough and my quality is pretty good. And if that's the case, then I put on my coach hat, which is, well, based on your age, this is the amount of hours of sleep. Cause let's assume that they're, mid to late 20s, cause that's most of the demographic. If we want to get real, like, what would be the word? Institution-based, like ideal sleep for this age group would be 7.5, 8 hours across the board. And that's not including intensive exercise. Like people forget about that. So the burden of exercise is going to require more sleep to allow for tissue recovery, organ repair, neurological repair, and cleansing. Like so much stuff happens when you sleep. And so if you're putting an excessive amount of physical burden on the body during the day, your sleep requirements instantly go up quite a bit. So I try to present it to clients that way who are not as connected to the value of sleep. And then if they come back with, well, I get off work at this time and then I don't have this enough time. And then I get up at this time. I'm like, well, those aren't reasons to not sleep enough. Then we need to make adjustments with things. And that's not an answer. So what do? We then work on, okay, well, how can we fix this so you have enough time to wind down before bed? Because then I'll, of course, discuss blue light and stimulation before bed and how that can inhibit the onset to sleep and how that can weaken the quality and depth of sleep that you get through the night, which is very important. I think people sometimes assume that total hours is king and they forget about quality being very important, because you can sleep 8 hours but not actually recover that well and wake up feeling kind of crappy, very fatigued, not a lot of energy. And then that's not good, because when you rest, you should be recovering energy and healing. And if you're not able to do that, that needs to be investigated further, because that's an issue that must be dealt with. Otherwise, you'll keep training, you'll probably get injured, and you're not going to improve much. So I try to really go deep into that with them to get them to recognize how important that is for their goal, their highest value. Like that's what I always got to that's always got to draw it back to that. And that just varies person to person based on how aware they are of sleep, how important it is, and how much of a priority they put on it right away. Because some people come to me and sleep's like religious to them, whereas for other people, it's just something that they have to do at the end of the day, and and everywhere in between.
It's almost like you have to figure out where that person's mindset is related to sleep to then be able to give them a good, I don't want to call it prescription, but recommendations and sleep habits and like other things that they could adjust based on what they already, like the assumptions or, position that they hold sleep in their mind currently.
Yes. And I use that scale with nutrition too. It's essentially, I'll present it as like 0 to 10. And 10 is perfect macros, perfect measuring, weighing, perfect meal timing, great food hygiene, etc. And then if somebody comes to you and they're a 1, you don't give them macros and all that overwhelms them. And after a week, they're like, I can't do this. This is too much. It's the same with sleep. If 10 is, 2 hours before bed, you cease eating, no technology, you're reading, meditating, journaling, you sleep 8.5 hours, all black, cold room, you don't wake up in the night, that's a 10. And somebody comes to you at a 2, you can't throw all that on them right away. It's like, okay, what's the lowest hanging fruit to improve your sleep quality and length that I can help you with right now, which could be, and usually is, get rid of technology 30 more minutes before bed. Just turn that off, get a book, journal, do meditation, mobility, whatever you need to do to calm your nervous system down. And then we go from there. Every few weeks, let's check in. How are we doing? Let's add to that. Because you can always add more. But if you start with too much, usually you've got to bring it back. And then that goes against progress. And most people, that's essentially all they really care about in some way, is they want progress. So start small and then build on it.
Yeah, it's the same thing for training volume too.
Yeah.
It's like if you can always get somebody more, but if you trash them up front, you're going to have to pull out way more. And it's way harder to regress that way than it is to just add a little bit more in each time. And
psychologically, like that's the big thing. And those are principles for life. It's like we can always, like Atomic Habits, that's why it was a bestseller, because the way he presents that work is literally put your shoes by the door for the next week. And then the next week, put your shoes on. And then the next week, go, stay with your shoes on your feet for 5 minutes. And then eventually you're on your way to the gym, for, of course, all the people who don't train like our world does. But that the principle being like, make it so small that it almost seems insignificant. And it's the same with training. It's the same with nutrition. It's the same with sleep. It's the same with mindset pieces. You want to just think of like, what are these really small little changes I can make that will compound over time? And now in 6 months, you're a totally different person. That's what you're trying to do. You're not trying to become Matt Frazier overnight. You're trying to become Matt Frazier in 6 years. but most people don't have the patience for that.
It's hard to sell that.
Yeah, it is. But that doesn't change the approach.
The truth. Yes,
The
absolutely.
truth. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when you create these really manageable small wins for people, they compound over time. And it's just something where the person probably doesn't even recognize it, which is helpful to a degree, because then you look back, 3 years down the road and you're like, wow, I've made all of these changes and my life looks dramatically different now than what it did before. But it's like, maybe a good example or analogy would be someone's losing a bunch of weight and they lose, a half or a quarter pound a week, which seems insignificant day over day because they're looking at themselves each day in the mirror, but they see the relative that they haven't seen in, 8 months. And the person's like, oh my gosh, you look so much different. And they're like, well, I just feel like me. But it was like all these tiny little decisions that they made over that course of that time that made that big change occur.
Yeah. It's that delayed gratification perspective, the famous marshmallow test from the 60s or 70s at Stanford. And we culturally we're getting more and more programmed away from that, and we're searching for instant gratification, and that's not great in any way, shape, or form. And so if there's any sport, well, I'm biased because I'm just deep in it right now, that really requires a lot of delayed gratification, it's CrossFit, because the body takes time to adapt and see very big adaptations. You can make these little adaptations week over week over month, but I mean, it takes years to get to these higher levels in a sport like CrossFit. And so that's a big goal of mine with all my clients. I'm trying to get them really bought into the idea of delayed gratification and really keeping their vision down the road and seeing this training session this day as an opportunity to build upon the previous day, which is going to build, this great wall of China over time.
Do you think that's the case? Like people taking a long time to get better in the sport of CrossFit because there's just so many disciplines. Like, for example, I think someone could get better at basketball if they're like 18 or 20 years old and they're talented because it's a relatively small number, like a subset of skills that you need to get better at. Mm-hmm. People who know basketball pretty well are probably going to be upset with me by that. But like relative compared to something like CrossFit, there's less things on the opposite ends of the spectrum, like strength and endurance. Okay, those are clearly on opposite ends of the spectrum. Yep. Is that why we have so many things that we're trying to get better at concurrently, that's why that adaptation process is so prolonged?
Yeah. So look at it this way. With basketball, think of how many iterations, and let's just say contractions, as in steps and strides and games you can play through your teenage years. I mean, you can play thousands on thousands of minutes. Think of all the minutes Michael Jordan played from when he was 10 years old till he was 20. Like you can play basketball every day for 3 hours every day. You can't train CrossFit for 3 hours every day. So there are limitations, which is why volume is so important, because you're trying to build more exposure to everything over time. But then of course people forget, well, how do you build volume? Well, you need to begin where you currently sit. Like, what are you capable of right now? And then I need to build a little bit on that and make sure that you're adapting, recovering from it really well every time before we build more and more and more. And you can't fast track that because then you create compensations, you can create mechanical overload and cause injuries, et cetera. So that's why, let's say, there needs to be more patience in CrossFit because of this strength adaptation we need, the contraction volume we need to build, and just the massive amount of exposure to all these skills, because CrossFit is arguably probably one of the most complex sports because there's so many variables. Like I was just thinking about this before our call too. I was like, it's absurd, like how many variables there are in CrossFit that you have to be good at and think about and train, et cetera. Like it's not basketball. Now I'm not degrading basketball by any means. It's very, like basketball players are arguably the most athletic people in the world, but it's there's a lot of confines in the sport and in what transpires. Where in CrossFit, there's almost no boundaries. It's wild.
Just like, imagine how many take like I don't know, 3-point shot.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can take hundreds of thousands of 3-point shots.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is one skill, and you can practice different dribbling techniques and layups and all of those skills, but it's probably a relatively small subset versus if you look like all the variations of all the movements at all the different intensities and cycle speeds that you have to perform them at in CrossFit, and all the things that could potentially come out that you might need to be prepared for. It is so much, like, just like the testing body is potentially so big. It's insane how long it takes for you to get all those skills to be more refined.
Yeah, you could just take one. You take like the snatch. You can go from a max snatch all the way down to Randy, 75 for time at 75 pounds for men, 55 for women. And there's a lot in between there. And that's why you try to find KPIs, key performance indicators, that become indirect measures for success in the sport. Now, the problem is the sport is really loosely defined. It's not very clearly defined what it is. They have a definition, but it's way too loose.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to create KPIs because it's always changing and adapting. So you're trying to like figure out as a coach, well, is 30 ring muscle ups a good KPI? Maybe. Is Fran a good KPI? Not really. Are 4 Frans in a row a good KPI? That's getting closer to what a really good KPI is. As weird as that sounds for some people, like you need to be able to do 120 chest bar, 120 thrusters and make that aerobic. I mean, my guess for 21.3, since that's coming out tomorrow, not to date this episode or anything, but is 10 rounds for time, 10 chest bar, 10 thrusters, like 100 and 100. That's, the elite will make that like it's nothing.
Yeah.
Just turn that over. So, it's a very fascinating sport, and that'd
be less volume than 19.5.
Yeah. Cause I think that was 105
each. Yeah. I like it. So how would you think about building volume? This could be, training sessions. This could be individual, movements in an actual session. Is it all those things? How do you think about taking, again, that intermediate athlete, the example that we used before, and building on them?
Yeah. Well, I think really simply, if you lay out a plan in your mind, what's my goal? The goal is, if let's say a normal week of training, you did 1,000 total reps, and you can, measure that however you want. And then a year from now, in the same type of cycle, same time of the year, they're at 1,300 reps and they're adapting and recovering to it. Like, that's very, very reductionist on what you're trying to do with volume over time. Is you're trying to you need more like gross volume in the training. So how would you do that? So if you have this intermediate person, you're trying to make them go to the semis. Well, first, we need to think about functional volume, as in the amount of reps that are required in the sport. So to use easy examples, like you just said, 19.5, 105 chest bar, 105 thrusters. And that's about consistent with what is functional volume of those movements in the competitive setting at the open sanctional levels. Like, you should be able to do 100 chest to bar in a workout without tearing your hands and without having to do singles. And you should be able to do thrusters around 100 at those RX weights. Muscle ups, 20.5, you had to do 40 in an open workout. So now the functional volume ceiling goes up, because before that it was around 30 reps. Yeah. So these become, and I wrote a article on this on our blog, Big Dogs, I think a couple of years ago. And I kind of outlined, based off of the open, like what are functional volumes for particular movements. And so those become your beacons that you're trying to build somebody towards in their training. Like, you need to be able to do 100 chest to bar, on a Monday, and then 100 on Friday, and recover and not tear your hands, like, just as one idea. And if you're getting closer to that over time, then you can say, like, okay, you're moving in the right direction for the sport. Mm-hmm. So we have functional volume. Then of course we have like where people currently sit. So of course we can do tests. Like for example, one test I give is 20 sets of 5 unbroken chest to bar for time, which is 100. And elite people do that in the low 4s or under 4 minutes, depending on body weight. And then 5 or 4.5 to 5.5 minutes is still good and competent. And then now you're getting above 5.5, 6 minutes, like, okay, there needs to be work done in this particular pattern. And that could also be them tearing their hands, them having to, do hanging like 5 sets of 5 instead of butterfly 5s. So getting some good tests to see where people currently sit, because let's say somebody does the 20 sets of 5 in 7 minutes and they were doing smooth butterfly reps through 60 reps, and then the last 40 were just death, then that tells you that right around 60 to 65 is kind of their threshold right now of what their system can handle. So then in training, you can start to build that in progressive weeks, lower fatigue setting most likely, and then, progressively adding fatigue or complexity to it, and then retesting. And that's just for one skill out of 100. Yeah. So that becomes challenging because then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what are the lowest hanging fruits? What pieces are lacking the most? And then now let's figure out how we're going to prioritize those and work on them for extended periods of time while we're touching other things. Because that's essentially, I would say, what you're doing with these intermediate, trying to get them towards advances. You're picking a few pieces that you really want to improve, and then the rest you're just touching to make sure their system's getting in reps and exposure on a weekly, monthly basis. Because you can't do everything every cycle. It's like you need 1 or 2 main priorities. That's always kind of my hardcore rule. It's like, what are my 2 priorities for the next 4 or 5 weeks? And let's really attack those, and let's make sure everything else isn't pulling away from those priorities, but we're just we're sustaining the fitness characteristics we need in those areas.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is an obstacle for probably less people than they actually think, but still a number of people, is absolute strength metrics just still aren't there for them. So for example, they still can't snatch, the 4th ladder in 17.3, for example. Mm-hmm. Like they just don't have, whether it's the battery or just like the absolute strength numbers, like the actual 1RMs to be able to get to the next level in the sport. And then also they don't perform as well as they could on 17.5, which is just like an engine workout with like thrusters and double unders. So if you have someone in that scenario, again, an intermediate athlete, that same avatar, how might you lay out their training year or a particular cycle to get both of those metrics better over time?
Yeah. Well, I do approach training and the layout of training based around kind of the goals for the year. So most people, the open becomes kind of the big goal. We might have like smaller competitions people want to do, but everybody will have a bigger goal for the year. And I want to use the term peaking lightly or loosely, because most people don't have enough fitness and volume built to actually really peak. It's not really peaking. It's just making them fresh, making them confident, and making them feel fit for whatever they're doing. But there are some, like games athletes, who are trying to peak at a specific time in the year for a specific event, and they have the volume built to do that. So we have our date, which is usually, the open. It's in February, March. December is when we're starting like the open specific preparation, 12 to 16 weeks out, where everything's starting to now funnel down towards the open. So from April until December, so that'd be like 7 months or 7 or 8 months, we're training and working on characteristics that we need to improve for the next year. And so in the middle of that, which is usually July, I do a testing block where I'm testing characteristics with people. So, we get a good 3.5 months of training, and then we test a good amount of things. to see how the system's doing, to see where the pieces we wanted to improve upon are at. And then the next 3-ish months allows me time to work on the pieces we want to keep tightening before we get into preparation for the open, when we're not necessarily hitting a particular skill set, but we're starting to just sharpen everything and get the system ready for the competition. So with regard to strength and capacity, because of course those are the big, like, am I strong enough? Can I breathe well enough? And maybe if you just slept more, you could breathe better and you would adapt to your strength training faster.
There you
go. But yeah, I also wrote a blog recently that got a lot of traction on absolute strength and strength speed numbers for the sport. And how I approached it was I identified base level numbers for your snatch that you need at each level. So like for the open, I identified it was, I think, 155 for females, 225 for men, which was the fourth bar in 17.3. Like you need to be able to snatch those to compete in the open, not participate, because there's 250,000 people doing the open and probably only 50,000 can snatch 225, 155, maybe less. And then from that, I use structural balance percentages to then create numbers for all the subsequent lifts above that: clean and jerk, front squat, back squat, deadlift. So like if somebody was in great balance, like what would those numbers be? And then that's what the numbers I came out with. And then for the sanctionals, I think it was 175 female and 245 or 250 men or male. And then for the games, it was 275 and 185 female. So, and the caveat I put in there was there are exceptions. This doesn't mean all of them will always hit that, because I have athletes currently who can't hit some of those numbers and they're at those particular levels, but those become a beacon to aim at. Like I want to be able to hit those numbers to play at that level. And so that's important. And if somebody, snatches 205 and then they want to compete in the open and they want to qualify for quarterfinals, then that next 7 months of training, we might need to put a little extra effort into working on the snatch, making that rise up. And then with capacity is interesting because we could talk a lot about that. My what would be the word? My perspective is a lot of people have more capacity than they think, but they're not able to access it because of poor training protocols, poor lifestyle, lack of efficiency and movement quality, lack of awareness in pacing and how they handle tasks in capacity-based testing. So there's a lot of variables that people are not aware of that play into capacity and strength too, but not it. Like strength it's a little bit more black and white. You either can lift the weight or you can't, which is why it's great. But with capacity, a lot of people have more than they think. They just don't access all of it. So efficiency becomes something that people can wrap their hands more around and really try to improve to express more that they already have.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the things that I think are underrated is rather than just trying to beat yourself down with more training, or maybe more intensity would be the word, to focus on moving better and moving easier at the beginning so that you can then express your fitness that you already have better on game day.
A great example that'll resonate with a lot of people is Jason Khalipa in his prime arguably had greater capacity than Rich Froning. He probably objectively, like if they both did VO2 max, I would probably put money down that Jason would have a higher one than Rich. However, Rich would always crush him or always beat him because Rich's efficiency was so much greater. Like Jason was known, like that was his persona, that I'm this big, strong guy and I'll work harder than anyone and just move my body and the weight as fast as I can. And that's what he did. And so he had to create so much capacity to handle such efficiency that would allow him to compete at that level. And so if he and towards the end of his career, he was getting more efficient. Like he was doing a good job at that, which allowed him to be competitive his last couple of years individually. If he would have adopted that perspective from 2010 onward, which he might have, but it could, you could put more effort into it.
Right.
I think he would have been able to bump shoulders even more with Rich or beat him a couple times. And then this is also the case with marathon runners and endurance athletes. You see this discrepancy in those who, cyclists as well, who have like the highest VO2, but they don't necessarily win the races because this efficiency economy aspect that doesn't get talked about. And it's the same idea in CrossFit. Like over time, you just see the best in the sport. You look at Matt. I mean, everything he does is so efficient. He does not waste any energy because that's what you're trying to do in CrossFit. It's like you're trying to be as efficient as possible to use the least amount of energy possible to accomplish the work. And movement economy becomes the gateway for that, amongst other things.
Plus, if you're trying to work on your absolute strength numbers and you're putting a lot of emphasis on that earlier in your season, like further away from your, competitive peak, let's call it, then yeah, you literally have more adaptation currency, so to speak, to giving it towards your strength numbers if you're trying to move really efficiently and cleanly and working on focusing on that in your metcons and mixed work versus, just hammering yourself every time when you do a metcon.
And you know what you're also doing is you're changing your body's perception of the movement, and you're making the perception of it easier. So like when your brain does a thruster, it's not at a 9 out of 10, it's at a 7 out of 10. It's like, yeah, this feels good. I can breathe in the top and the bottom. When I do an overhead squat, I can breathe in the top and the bottom. That's the big piece is you're trying to make the movements more reasonable to your system. And that change that allows you to adapt more effectively to it over time because you can do more of it without the accumulated burden that it places on your system. Specificity. So if you want your snatch to get better over time, not only your max snatch, but submaximal cycling loads, very derivatives of it, you need a lot of touches of it. And in order to do a lot of touches, that movement has to perceptually get easier for the brain. It's like running. You're going to run some crappy miles, but you have to accumulate a lot of volume for the system to see running as this very easy, effortless activity. Yeah. It's the same with CrossFit.
Yeah, that might be a good example where I'm sure people have been out of like quote running shape and in quote running shape, where it's like everybody's probably been to the point where it's like running's not very fun. It hurts my joints, my knees and ankles get cranky and this and that. And there's probably other times, which maybe some people have experienced, maybe some not, where it's like, oh, running is like effortless. It's fun. It's smooth. It's this flow state, like runner's high type feel. And you can do that with mixed work if you do it enough and you focus on the right things while you're doing it.
100%. And that's what you're trying to do because you're trying to make all those dynamic reps like easy running. Like that's, yeah. I mean, if you want to boil it all the way down, that's what it is. That's what elite people do, which is why they can do so much of it in training and recover, adapt, and get better. So that's the goal.
Again, I think when you see just even like facial expressions of elite athletes while they're doing, training metcons, testing's a little bit different, but especially like, a relaxed environment in their gym, they're just coming in, doing their metcon for the morning or whatever. Like they look really relaxed. They look smooth. Nothing looks rushed or overly, tense or any of those qualities that you see in like all the intermediate and lower level athletes. Like everything's just sort of smooth and they're moving through and it's just like exactly what we're describing. But yet you look at the times and it's like, oh, wow, that was really fast, but it looked smooth. It looked efficient. It looked economical the whole time.
Less tension. There's less tension. And
yeah,
you can notice that externally and also it will be internally. Like there's less tension. They're able to breathe and relax. And that just comes through a lot of practice and a lot of refinement and a lot of, just a lot of touches. I was thinking of something else to say. Well, and really connecting it to your goal, because if, you go in and you want to film yourself and post it, or you want everybody to watch you, then you're probably going to be looking like you're in more pain. You're going to make more noise. You're going to get sloppy. You want to be more dramatic, but that's poor intentions. And that's going to bite you in the butt. If you so-called have this goal, which is this goal requires perfect movement efficiency, great volume, great lifestyle, and great intentions. And you don't find that in Instagram videos and attention in the gym from your hardcore Metcon.
Yeah. Is there any way that you would go about helping an athlete work through that process of having better intention, or maybe having better habits in the entry to sessions or the exit of sessions?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would ask them, be like, why do you work out like that? Like, why do you look like you're dying? Well, I am. Like, why do you want to die when you work out? Oh, it makes me feel good. Like, really? You need to punish yourself to feel good? Like, think about that. Is that why you train? You want to hurt yourself? Like, I mean, you can. Humans are interesting, so we do things that sometimes we don't want to tell people. But I'll start to just open up an easy conversation with them on, like, are you aware of like how you're actually doing this? And then you come to me and you say you want to have this goal, and then I of course start to tell them, like, these are the things you need to have in this goal. And one big piece is efficiency and smoothness and control. Like, these are characteristics you need. Yes, there are times where you're going to quote unquote go to the dark place, or whatever you want to call it. You're going to push yourself because you have this goal and your motivation is really high for the goal. And so you're going to push harder than you need to. But that's not every day. You can't go to the well every day. You'll kill yourself. You got to manage when you go to the well. And when you do these crappy sessions where you're being dramatic and you're looking like you're in a lot of pain, you're half going to the well when you don't need to, and you're not really getting better. You're getting worse. So I think just opening people's eyes a little bit to that is helpful, and getting them to buy into this idea of efficiency and smoothness and consistency, so that when it is time to push, you will have the resources and motivation to go for it. Like, okay, this is a test. We're pushing this. We're ready. We're not like, oh, here we go again. And then you do it and it's, half-assed. It's like, what was the point of that? So yeah, that's a tough one. Cause I think a lot of people might look at their training that way, and it's unfortunate because I don't think they have great intentions with it. And I don't think they're getting as much out of it as they otherwise could if they reevaluated it a little bit and started to create a little bit more awareness around their training and what they were doing and why they were doing it.
Yeah. The quote dark place is an interesting thing. And yeah, I either find people try to avoid it completely or they want to do it all the time. Mm-hmm. And it takes a while at a more mature athlete. And obviously, it's helpful if a coach is working with them to be more smart and tactile about when you go there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like, I think what you mentioned, which is like understanding your goal and intention, mm-hmm. to say like, okay, this is not the day for me to go there. Mm-hmm. This is the time for me to work on my movement and to work on some of these other qualities. And okay, today is a test, or today's a tester, or like an important piece that I'm really trying to hammer hard. I'm going to lay it all out there. And because you are more committed to your goal and you have to be actually more disciplined on the other days, that allows you to express way better on the days that you actually want to go there.
100%. And you brought up some great points there, that the coach's job is you need to be educating your clients on what's the intention in these sessions so they can bring the right amount of effort to the training, because not every day is hit your head against the wall. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that. And so that's a beautiful side of individualized coaching, is I can tell clients like what the intent is of this session, and then they can execute it appropriately so that when the time does come for the test or the open, they know the level of effort they need to give and they have the resources to do it. They're not running on a quarter tank.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting how a lot of what we talked about today was stuff that's at first glance more intangibles of like, oh, it wasn't necessarily the X's and O's of programming. I mean, it is, but there's so much more to it than that involves to, get somebody to actually go to the next level. Mm-hmm. Like there's so many little things and habits that ultimately will make the difference, like you mentioned before. Mm-hmm. So I think it's super interesting.
Programming's the sexy part. Like that's what gets people in. It's like, look at the cool things I do and look at the protocols and look at this. And then people, I don't do that. So that must be what I need. And you look at all the training, there's principles that are in all of it. Like there's nothing special. It's all training. What's special is the buy-in of the athlete and then aligning everything else that supports the training. And not enough people talk about that because, as you said, it's not that sexy. You can't really sell it. It doesn't get eyes. So it comes back to that delayed gratification idea. It's like the non-sexy things are not that gratifying right now, but they culminate to something that's very gratifying in the end. So it's going against that monkey brain that we have where we just need, these little hits of pleasure and excitement every day, and trying to discipline that a little bit more or having, a better control over it.
Really good stuff. All right. Last question for you. So if you have the intermediate, pretty good athlete come to you, that quarterfinals athlete, and they say like, hey, Sam, I'd really like to get to the point to where I'm good enough to compete at like a sanctioned event or the semifinals. I want to qualify for that, in the upcoming years. Do you have any advice for me? What do you say to that person? They just come up to you at like maybe your gym, wherever you're at, you're getting done with your training session. They just come up to you. Hey, Sam, what do you say?
I'm thinking of like a serious answer and a more like sarcastic a-hole type answer. So I'll go a-hole answer first. I'll ask them if they have a job, and if they say yes, I'm like, then get rid of your job. So that'd be number one. But the more serious one is I'd probably say, how much time are you willing to invest into it? And I would just keep it like that. And then I would just wait to hear what they have to say. Because I also want to hear their perception of time for this goal anyways. Because if they say, I want to give it a shot for this 1 year, then I'll say, okay, they have a truncated perception of time for this goal. So that's interesting. Then my follow-up will be, well, what place did you get this year? And then they say, 900th, be like, it's going to take more than a year. And
right.
Like, oh, okay. Well, so that's right.
So 2 years then.
2, like, well, what place did you get last year? And then they'd say 1200th. I'm like, okay, well, if you keep things the same and you decrease by 300 places every year, you need to get top 120 to make it to, a semifinal, or let's say be at a sanctional level. So you have another 2.5 years, let's say, easily. So let's say 3 years. You have 3 years. Are you going to give 3 years? And then they could say, yeah. And then we got to talk about now what goes inside those 3 years, which are all the things we discussed earlier. So yeah, patience. Patience is the big word. That's patience is that's the intangible that a lot of, Justin Medeiros, he's a perfect example. Like, that's such a great story because that kid's been working so hard for so long. I mean, he went to regionals, he was like 16, and he's just been training consistently. And I watched him in 2019. One of my athletes, Nick Block, beat him out by one spot at Granite Games, go to the games, because he couldn't do sandbag cleans very well. And he was about to beat Nick to go to the games, and he didn't. And what does he do next year? He's training, and he ends up going to the games, and he gets on the podium. So he had tremendous patience to see the long-term vision of his goal and be willing to put in the time for that. And now he's, reaping the rewards of that.
Yeah, really good. Sam, thanks for doing this today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening today. If you're someone who just started listening to the show, I would encourage you to subscribe so you can stay up to date. If you're someone who's been listening for a while, I would encourage you to rate and review the show. And lastly, the best thing that you can do to support our work is also the best thing that you can do for your performance. And that is by hiring one of our coaches. Until next time, stay the course.